go off into your cave, do testosterone boosting activities, regain your composure, and communicate what you need to communicate with loving kindness. Okay, here we go with part 13 in the series of breather shows about how to optimize testosterone naturally. We've talked about sleep, rest, recovery, and downtime. We've talked about diet, getting rid of the junk food, emphasizing the most nutritious foods. We talked about moving more frequently in everyday life. Talked about high-intensity exercise. We talked about avoiding overly stressful workouts. We talked about protecting yourself from modern endocrine disruptors in the environment, the stuff we put in our bodies and on our skin. We talked about some supplement strategies highlighted by my male optimization formula with organs from ancestral supplements, a wonderful way to naturally boost testosterone production without the concerns of introducing outside hormones. We talked about biohacking strategies like red light therapy, sun exposure, cold exposure, and then we talked about your career pursuits in part 11. So you want to pursue your inspired purpose, something that brings you joy and contributes to a greater cause. Then we talked about relationship tips from John Gray, the essential male and female relationship assignments. And now we have more relationship tips from great leaders like John Gottman. I also have a plug in here, Mark Manson advice. So I think you're going to love this. And number one, this is kind of my collating from not just Gottman and Mark Manson, but other resources too. And it's one of my biggest pillars in my life that I try to honor. And that is that you can communicate everything you need to say, good, bad, emotionally charged, with loving kindness. If you can't, back to the previous show and John Gray's advice, go off into your cave, do testosterone boosting activities, regain your composure, and communicate what you need to communicate with loving kindness. The research from the Gottman Institute, the widely cited research where you might have seen these headlines now. The Gottmans are getting really popular and putting out a lot of great content. You can get an email newsletter from the Gottman Institute. They talk about when you look at research of healthy couples, they see these amazingly common attributes. One of them is a fond recollection of how the couple first met. Isn't that interesting? So you can ask a couple that's done well, how'd you guys first meet? And they both light up and they talk over and they say, oh, you tell that, or all that kind of fun stuff relating their first meeting. And I suppose a relationship that's struggling, they might say, we met online 10 years ago, right? So a fond recollection of when they first met. And then the flip side of the research that's often cited is that the Gottmans can predict with like 93% accuracy a couple that is destined for divorce, that's not going to make it due to their communication patterns, and especially using the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, the now famous description of a dysfunctional relationship. And those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, if they are present in relationship, are stonewalling, defensiveness, criticism, and contempt, which the Gottmans cite as the worst of all. So contempt is the worst relationship dynamic you can have, and that is evidenced by rolling your eyes when telling a story or talking to the other person, and having that level of disrespect that you have contempt for what they do, who they are. That's a relationship that's doomed to fail with this 93% accuracy. So let's focus on the positive stuff. And the Gottmans have observed that healthy, thriving couples have a ratio of 20-to-1 positive to negative comments through everyday life, a 20-to-1 ratio. And then here's the awesome one. When in conflict, they still exhibit a ratio of 5-to-1 positive to negative. That one's pretty awesome. I'd love to see that in action because I haven't seen too many real life examples of that. Let me try one right now. Hey, honey, I really love your enthusiasm for how much you try to fit into a day. You really have an incredible zest for life. And you're also always up for anything and everything, excitement and adventure. And I love that spirit. And you're also really flexible with plans. And so I love that low maintenance aspect about you. And also, for me, it means a lot to be on time to things that were scheduled to be there. I just feel less stressed and more calm and relaxed when we leave on time. So could we focus on that in the future, right? Okay, so I went 1 positive, 2 positive, 3 positive, and then I only got to 4. So that was a 4 to 1 or 3.5 to 1 if I said the same thing. But I wanted to complain about my partner having a tendency to be late. But if you can serve it up that way, you can see how much better your chances of success are, rather than, dang, hurry up, you're late again, I'm sick of this crap, it's so disrespectful, here's some more criticism for you. Of course, that's just going to lead you down the spiral to stonewalling, defensiveness, criticism, and contempt. Nobody needs that kind of feedback. All right. Then we have a good quote from Brene Brown, where she's talking about the adverse consequences of holding on to resentment of any kind. And so communication is so much better than stuffing it and holding resentment. And her quote, "A minute of pain is better than a week of resentment." And that's really one that I appreciate and try to honor, because sometimes it's not so easy to bring up things, especially when you are charged with communicating everything with loving kindness. But say what you got to say. Keep your cool. Be the kung fu master. Do not get emotionally charged. You're allowed to speak and express your needs and your boundaries and all that great stuff. But loving kindness and not waiting, even I believe, overnight or 3 days later, because that sort of seems like a power play a lot of times, where the couple thinks everything's fine, but one of them has a resentment card in their back pocket, and they've decided to play it 3 days later about you talking too long in the corner at the party with Denise, okay? I chose Denise because I don't think I know anybody named Denise right now, but I apologize for any Denises out there. You're just a subject of the podcast. Okay. And also, so this is number 4. I talked about loving kindness. I talked about the 4 horsemen and staying away from that, being aware that resentment, holding resentment versus just communicating it, a minute of pain better than a week of resentment. And then having this healthy foundation of friendship and respect in your romantic partnership. Mark Manson had a great commentary about this in either of his books. I can't remember which, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, or Everything is Fucked, a book about hope. And he says that the research shows when you ask couples what's the number one most important objective or the most important attribute, and a lot of times communication comes up as number 1. But he argues that respect is more important than communication, because it's possible to communicate your ass off and still feel contempt, resentment, and engage in these dysfunctional communication patterns. So I love that take on the importance of communication. We feel communication is super important. Not if you're using words like bitch or F off, then communication is dysfunctional. So having that respect and that friendship as a base, I think, trumps your desperate need to communicate at all times. Okay, that was part 13. More relationship tips from Gottman, Brene Brown, Manson, and B.rad sticking in there with some votes. Could that be the end? I'm going to call it right there. That was a 13-part series on how to optimize testosterone naturally. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you can go back and punch into some of these topics, especially when they're falling off of your radar in busy, stressful life. But when you put that all together, boy, you're going to be the best that you can be. And I appreciate it. Fighting this journey with you. Thank you so much.